me that I remember the last 2 times, and it has been really wonderful. So I hope that today I can have good interactions with the audience. And then I realized that this is the summer school program, so probably that a little bit concise number of people today. So hopefully that we can have very good conversations together. And welcome everybody. Today that I have this title, Science, Trust and Technology, to talk about the global perspectives on the communicating food safety. So let's say food safety communication, but in this terminology, I have a thing to say. So let's get started. So the memory is probably fresh that the left side of the slide that I am showing, that family enjoying this food, and then food is joy, and then it is about family and connection. But then all of a sudden that the food safety comes in, the food safety issues come in, and then it's going to be seen as a risk, fear, even tragedy. And then when it happens that we do face as a food safety educators that something has to be done, and this something is usually starting with communication. So we do think about a lot on what to say, but then today that I want to just to focus on not only what, but then how we say it, when we say it, and why we say it. And then this is the important thing about food safety communication. And then I just wanted to highlight that how and then when trust is tested in the process. And I put usually this slide in saying like communication is easy, we do it every day, but then until it isn't, right? And then food safety, particularly that the communication never is just a message, and then it becomes our responsibility, and then also that there is no black and white, it is always gray zone, and then we have to think about what to say, what not to say, how we say it, and then what is most effective, what is not most effective. But then it doesn't get to this idea that there is the way to do it. So it's always changing, always needing to have a different way of saying and different thing to say, even if exactly the same thing. But then if audience changes, time changes, then everything changes. And then trust is the foundation of effective communication. We know it, we learned it, but then we say it over and over and over, but it's still that it's so difficult to tackle. So this is the thing that I will keep saying it during this presentation, that communication is not easy. So this is something that we want to share, but then still it is our responsibility. So we have to nail it and we have to do it. So that's why that we want to think about this today with all of you. Before I start, I received this survey results, those people who registered to this webinar. And then I heard from Siapa that 200 some people registered, but then usually it is the case that we have about 1/3, but then more or less that this is the domestical, the statistical information that we have some private sectors and the public sectors and academia and then others. So quite a good representation today. And then we have 182 people at the time of the survey on the registration list, and then from 35 different states. So that is quite diverse representation from the US audience. And then I see in the chat box earlier that we have some people from outside of the United States, so that it's really wonderful. And then people identified themselves as mostly educator. some food handlers, some students, some business management, and then quite a bit of other people exist. But then this is a multi response from people. So it's always like you could be an educator at the same time you could be a handler, right? And then you can be a business person and then also the educator. So this is more or less the representation of us today. And then we'll play a role in shaping food safety from different angles. So I just wanted to highlight that I am going to primarily focusing on the talk for the educators to begin with, but then of course that this applies to other roles too. So first that I would like to tackle this terminology communication first, because it is always very important to exactly know that what we are talking about. And then communication is, usually we think about dialogues, verbal information exchange. But then when we talk about science communication, food safety communication, and risk communication, those three different types of communication, let's say, all sound quite similar and then very familiar because we do it and then we engage in any, those three types of communications. But then somehow it may feel different for each person, that we have different perception of hearing about science communication versus food safety communication or risk communication. So let's try to visit those three different categories. But then I just give you already a spoiler, the answer that there are no solid definitions about it at the international level. So we don't have the answers, but then we can think about it, we can talk about it. First, science communication. I have asked in the survey that what does it mean to you? And then most of you said that the science communication is basically explaining the why part. And then this is about building the understanding. And then if we talk about some microbes, for example, and these microbes thrive at a certain temperature, this kind of information giving is educational, and then we are trying to give why part to the food safety, then it is somehow people think that this is the part of the communication that's called science communication, because we are trying to explain the background of the issue. Then it comes to the food safety communication, and then lots of you said that this is about how. So it is about how to make things better, how to prevent something goes wrong, or some practical applications about how to apply the knowledge that we usually gain through the science communication that I talked about into the everyday situation, the practical way. And then also some tailored guidance customized to the specific audience so that the audience would be able to relate to it. And then this is somehow that I gave the example, they use the thermometer to cook poultry at 165 degrees. This is practical guidance, giving you what to do. And then this seemed to be like the communication that you guys, that the audience thought that it is a food safety communication. But then of course that there are a variety of responses about what it should mean. But then I'm trying to explain that this is how most of you think that as intuitively that when they hear food safety communication, this is the expectation that people have. And then finally, the risk communication is the tricky one because there are two versions. So first of all, the most of you thinking is that this is about something about emergency, something about uncertainty. So guiding the decision in this kind of situation, risk communication is that when there is a certain stress, that a certain pressure is there, that the time pressure or something that you kind of have to decide something, and then facts are not fully open, that the facts are still unfolding, and then people have to decide no matter how uncertainty exists. And then this seems to be for people to understand that this is the time to do the risk communication. So there's a recall, and then there could be this pathogen possibly linking to this recall. Okay, recall is already decided, so we have to act on it, but then we still have to investigate some of the issues. And then, this kind of issue, we have to make it a very clear way to communicate. And then this is the term that most of you think that it is the part of the risk communication. But then there's another one. So in the paradigm, we call it food safety risk analysis, right? And then this framework that we have three pillars. Risk analysis has risk assessment and risk management and risk communication. So basically how this paradigm was set up is that the risk assessment is the scientific part. Risk management is this manager part, and then they have to communicate each other in terms of the risk assessors talking about science, and then risk manager taking all those science and then consider other issues to think about what to do about it. Then the communication comes in not only between the risk assessors and risk managers, but then also like anything related to this issue that with the stakeholders, and then also the public, anybody in that process, that this kind of communication is captured as the official definition in Codex or FAO or WHO, that we call it risk communication. So this has a definition, is the interactive exchange of information throughout the risk analysis process concerning risk and risk-related factors. So this is the risk communication. But then when we really say that risk communication, this definition does not come as the first, impression of what risk communication should be. But then I think that some people who studied, who are inside of this risk analysis framework, this is very foundational idea of what risk communication is. So there could be some sort of mixed understanding about what risk communication is. But then I would like to just highlight in this paradigm, this framework, that the risk communication is not just what happens at the end. So it's not about communicating at the end of the process, but then rather throughout the entire process from the beginning to the end, or even in between the issues. So I just want to highlight how those three different types of the communication fit in. Let's say that in one situation, so three phases of communication, let's say, exist, but they're not very clear-cut in silos. But then at one single event, for example, Salmonella outbreak, it may need all three phases, all three types of the communication inside of this process. So for example, when nothing happened, there's no outbreak, then science communication happens because that this is the general educational communication that we talk about, explaining how Salmonella can spread and how some Salmonella can grow, and then how this can harm people, those kind of basic scientific explanation. And then also the food safety communication can or should happen at the proper cooking temperature, or avoiding the cross-contamination, those kind of rather educational and then very peacetime, the regular way of the communication happens. So I would call it this pre-outbreak, when nothing happened, and then this is a good the cases, good types of the communication. But then we will realize later on that how important those are, right? But then I will just move to number two. So when outbreak happens, so of course that suddenly this risk communication, this urgent alert, what to do. what is the problem, like what exactly each sectors or each individual has to do about it. This kind of communication becomes certainly important, very number one important way of communication. But then, of course, at the same time, that for those people that who would like to know why certain people have to act in a certain way, or why people has to do something about it, the science communication, very concise, very lay people's terminology that we do have to explain. And then this is what we are doing. This is how we are detecting. This is how we are investigating. This kind of communication sometimes need to happen. And then after the outbreak, that we have those two types of communication. One is food safety communication, saying that, look, that this happened, now it is okay. And then there is a way to prevent the recurring or something that the scaling of this unfortunate event. So there are some food safety communication necessary to inform that what can be done. And then also the science communication, that's sharing that what lessons we have learned through this outbreak, and then how we can use these lessons in the future. That kind of communication needs to happen. So this entire phase, that somehow that it prominent, looking very important, it's somewhat risk communication in phase 2. But then in the end, that what is most effective is, of course, pre-outbreak, right? And then or post-outbreak that connects to pre-outbreak. So I think that what I wrote on the left side becomes suddenly super, super, super important. And then this has to happen in a very consistent way, regular way. Then, but then you kind of need to know that when this role of the communication shifts, this alongside of this time frame, and then how we have to be aware of that, what communication is keeping the public informed, not really overwhelming them. So this is something that we are really dealing with in the time of this the outbreak or some sort of emergency. But then we have all different types of communications are needing inside of this scheme. Now that you might be wondering that, but then okay, it's all communication. So why we are categorizing them? And then it is just too much to think about which communication and what and when, and then I cannot remember all of them, right? So I agree that it's all communication. It's very important. We can call it all food safety communication, no problem. But then I think that the reason why that we tend to categorize those kind of communication is because of the effectiveness of thinking about this response team. So some sort of plan, the communication plan, how we can align this communication plan with the training, or how can we do this with a very good the educational campaign. So categories is not to limit us to just to do the mechanically, but then rather to prepare very thoughtfully. So because these types of communication require very much careful preparation. So we need to know that, okay, we have to prepare for the something bad happens. We have to be very careful about how to say this kind of information, how to give this scientific information. So we have to have some good preparatory phase to set up the risk communication, for example. And then we probably need to have a very good making sense way of providing the science communication. And then, of course, about the practical instructions and guidelines, and like something to tell that what to do about any kind of food safety situation. This is the food safety communication requires to make the connection between science communication, risk communication, because we do have to talk about the consequences of doing something or not doing something, right? So, and then I just want to highlight, this is the highlight number one, I am repeating this, but then risk communication in particular is incredibly difficult. But if we engage without preparation, let's say, and then nothing, we don't think about it. We don't have usually very clear facts during the emergency. And then if we don't have a very good trust relationship with the audience, and then if we don't really think enough about how to go about in terms of providing the message, we can actually risk the making situation lots worse. So if it is not done well, I have seen lots of confusion, panicking, people questioning, and then credibility goes down, and it affects a long-term trust relationship in the after the incidents. So that's why that we think that it is very important that treat each types of the communication very carefully, and then also to have a good skill set, and then learning from each other, and then plan ahead. I know that it's easy to say plan ahead, but then what I am trying to say is that in order to have a very good risk communication, the business as usual, this peacetime communication setup becomes extremely important. So second time, I am re-emphasizing that the communicating science is hard, right? This is the question that I asked during the survey time. And then I asked everybody, you, that what makes food safety communication especially difficult? And then people said, like, because there's no black and white, and then we cannot give, like, do this, you'll be 100% safe. This doesn't happen. So it's always, I know, zero risk in food safety. There's always a certain level of risk, and we kind of have to talk about this. Well, it's generally okay, but then if you don't do this, this happens. So this communication of the risk is really requiring lots of experiences. And we just need to understand that what is it that the people would react, and then what is it that the people will relate, and then so that this behavior follows through. So this is the thing that I am just really re-emphasizing, that I have been in this food safety area over 20, maybe 25 years now, but then it's still very difficult. So it's not something that I would say, like, okay, do this and do that, but then it requires each individual to experience, and then, try and then fail, and then do it again and refine, and, this kind of practice is necessary. So never too late. So I do it every day. I try to understand the different audience, different way of communicating, different, it's like a toolbox, right? So one way, just keeping one way is not the answer. So we have to have a different tools available to make the science communication better, tailored for a different audience. So this is the results of the survey. Thank you very much, everybody, for answering these questions. And then it really confirmed that what I am experiencing in the food safety area, and then I think that you all can relate to. So people said that food safety issue is often too technical for everyday understanding. Yes. And then it is hard to simplify the message without losing the important nuance. So it's exactly how I always feel that, well, FAO does have this communication unit who always ask me, like, Masami, please explain in 2 sentences. And then I go like, oh, well, I mean, I have so many important things to say, but then I cannot do it in 2 sentences. So I really always feel this way, that if I simplify too much, then very important factual issues will get lost. So what do we do, right? And then also the cultural practices that conflict the recommendation. It happens a lot. I am a Japanese national, so of course that I do eat sushi back in Japan. And then back in Japan, that if somebody says, like, oh, sushi is raw fish, and then it's very risky, which is actually true, right? But then if somebody says, like, don't eat raw fish, then I'm sure that the Japanese people get really upset. So we kind of have to think about how to say it, what to say it, what to understand about cultural context, context becomes super important. So how do we do that? Because it's true that raw fish consumption is not highest, safest practice of the world. Okay, now that the people resisting changing their habits, yes, it happens. This has been always the way to make my cheese. And then nobody got sick. My grandma did it, my grandpa did it. So why do I have to change it, right? So this kind of communication happens. And then also I have been saying that it's not black and white. So it's interesting that the food safety, for example, microbiological, the pathogen, the contamination happens, and then the same food source and the same table, the same food, and the people eat about the same amount, but then few people can get sick, and then few people are completely fine, few people get seriously sick. What does it mean? No, I mean, we just say that, okay, there must be something in it, but then some people can express severe symptoms. Some people do have probably a good immune system or better microbes, the microbiomes, then the outcomes are different. So we cannot say that if you eat it, you get sick for sure. And then that's not a very good communication. So it's very difficult to give that type of communication. And then the last one, I cannot agree more that somehow misinformation, something that is not quite true, spread faster than scientific fact. So we always have this situation that we have to counter this misinformation with the correct information, and this correct information with the fact are usually not necessarily very attractive message, right? So this is not fun. The scientific facts are not fun, but then we kind of have to keep throwing at this misinformation, and then this is very hard the way. So that's why that the food safety communication becomes extremely difficult. So I just want to say that it's hard, but then we don't give up. All of us are trying hard to make it right, and then do our best to give the communication information effective to people so that nobody has to suffer from the horrible consequences of the food safety incidents. But then we do feel this difficulty, and then we are not alone. So we can work together, we can share the information, and then we can improve. So now that I heard from Siapa that there is a chat box, that if you have any questions, I think that you can probably type your questions using the chat box. But then I just keep going with this presentation, and then hopefully that Siapa or Betty, you can get some questions meanwhile. But then meanwhile, that I just want to explain that we are potentially educator here, but then we are not only the educator, right? We do have to become a translator, not the language wise, but then we are saying that, okay, simplifying the language or accessible language, and then without losing accuracy. So we kind of have to play the role of the context translator. And then also that looking at this misinformation part, that we think that we need to be an advocate. So we are the champion in food safety practices. So we just need to have this proactive way of advocating the food safety issues, food safety information to people. So this is another role that we have to play. And then we are all scientists, so we just need to maintain this integrity and the credibility while making information relevant. Sometimes that it does happen to me that I want to give up, and then we say like, okay, do whatever you want to do. But then we cannot do that. We have to keep maintaining that, well, here is what we know from the scientific fact, and then here's uncertainties, and then, here are the options, and then what do you think, right? So this kind of scientist role is also very important to keep it in the core. And then I think that the biggest lesson is that this last role, we are the listener. So we are able to understand what our target audience is really concerned about, and then what makes them to be motivated to good food safety practices. So this is something that I sometimes think that, okay, I am all of these, but then sometimes that we have to identify the time that where that I play what role. So this is something that I just wanted to show you. So because you will be playing any of them, maybe combined or separately, that for many different food safety issues. So I think that this is a very important realization that we all need to have. And so it's a very emotional sometimes, because there are sometimes that a very difficult situation to communicate, and then sometimes that we have to have not only about scientific integrity, but then ethical integrity has to be there. You have to be able to understand what to say, what not to say in an ethical way, and then we have to keep our professional, the image. So it's all very quite overwhelming. But then I think that we carry it every day, and then we make the constant effort. And then I think that in a way that if we think that we are all doing it, and then we are all sharing this, and then we know that what is difficult, what can be done, what is the practical way to do it, I think that is a very good strength together with the toolbox that I talked about. I think it is very useful in this to play this food safety communicator role. Now that I want to move on to the hot topic of AI. So do you realize, I am sure that everybody realized that nowadays that we are not just communicating to people. So we are talking to algorithm or bots or AI, not in a direct way, but then they are quietly or loudly reading what we produce. And then they are hearing, they are scanning, and then they are resharing what we create as a communication material. So this is a very important thing that we have to realize, that if we are giving a very good message to the outside of the world, both verbally and then written communication. If it is written, that we need to always be aware that this written communication can be extremely useful to be reshared through this kind of systems, the algorithm or AI. So our messages hopefully always need to be machine readable, and then also human readable. So we kind of have to think about two different audience. And then we talk about this countering the misinformation, right? So I think that you might have already experienced this kind of situation, but the misinformation I see a lot is through social media, or sometimes even mainstream media. The information is there and they're not quite correct. But then if we don't do the same way, that it cannot counter it. So we kind of need to feed these data-driven systems with the very credible content, with the trusted relationship too. So it's a big work. But then realizing that this is something that we are doing. So this is the target audience that we are adding to the communication. This realization is quite important. And then we just need to remember that if we don't actively supply this kind of information, credible, scientific, this AI or bots or whatever, this machine will pick up whatever that is the easiest or the substantial amount, and then they'll pick and then like a reform and then reshare the content. So it is becoming our responsibility to feed them with the very good, correct information. So those two audiences that I'm trying to differentiate, and then also have a commonality, but then human audience that needs emotional connection, and then also the relevance, relatability, and then also what to do about it. So practical context is something that human audience would really require. So for example, this red part is the example, but then for example, using analogies or stories that resonate culturally or something like that would really be effective to talk to the human audience, right? But then on the other side, that the machine audience, that machine needs structured data or categorization or terminology. I mean, very clear cut, like a really machine logistics that it is curated in a way that the machine can really understand how to analyze this kind of information, right? So tagging or content to be structured, with the heading or numbered items or, like some metadata to come together so that machine finds it easier to reuse, and then it will become connected to the higher visibility. So something that we may like to think about both, and then maybe it can be combined together because some human, of course, like this structured content, and then those metadata or tagging, it doesn't have to be super visible to the regular communication. So it can be mixed together, but then this idea of having a different audience needs to be there so that we connect both emotionally to the humans and then also clearly to the machine audience. Now that what AI can do well in this space, I put together that I am sure that everybody knows what AI can do very well these days. So I can see that we are educators and you are educators, and then you may have been doing some of those that work, but then we can wisely use this AI to help us with the scaling the outreach or translation or personalization or monitoring and surveillance information about the wrong information, misinformation, or maybe automating this message outreach, those kind of things that we can really use AI to do our communication well and then effective and then efficiently. But then here are what human can offer that AI cannot. I just want to highlight four things. One is this, I have been talking about trust and the cultural nuance, that this is not something AI can do well. So we need to understand that this is ours and this is human, that the people trust people. And then specialists can build credibility not through the machinery structure, but in rather empathy, language, experience and stories, analogy, those kind of skill set can navigate this good food safety communication. And second one is, I call it like a stepping back skill. So we can look at a very specific narrowed item, but then we can really see in the systems thinking, let's say the big picture thinking, and then we can connect this problem may be related to this idea or this culture or this issue can be learned from this lessons, like this kind of connection human does better than a machine, at least at this moment. And then so this bridging and then also this insight that that having a big picture insight, it's something that human can do. So I really think that this is something that we have to be really aware and then realize that what we should be really focusing on when we are talking about having AI help. And then also this adaptive facilitation. So for example, the US extension services, you involve lots of dialogues, listening, and then working together, co-designing the communication. So of course that the AI can inform, AI can help, build the message, but then what AI cannot do is building the consensus. Building, like some sort of team feeling. And then this human facilitation remains irreplaceable. And then it is extremely important in terms of this trust building process. And then also the ethical judgment and responsibility. At this moment, AI is completely lacking on this. So human is always, I always call it like it is called the human in the loop, right? And then AI can help with a lot of work, but then always there is a human checking, validating, judging, checking for the ethical issues, and then ensuring the messaging is ethical and then responsible, and then it is empowering, not really focusing on only the negative, but then we are able to balance the message, those all kind of human nuance that we are still extremely good at compared to AI. So this is something that we might like to think about in terms of the human AI interaction. And trust that I have been talking about, where does trust comes in. And even when we say the right thing, if the trust is not there, it doesn't land. So such an important thing that we talk about trust, and then I've been talking about trust for the last 30 minutes, but then this is not to build in a messaging. It is more of the time, tone, presence, conversation. This is how the trust is built. And then I want to have two types of trust here to explain. The one is institutional trust. It's very interesting that working at the global organization that I realized that lots of, let's say, industrialized or advanced countries tend to have this institutional trust. If somebody is saying it in this institution, coming from this government agency, or having an extension specialist saying it, this kind of like credibility of an institution exists. But then when I go to some low and middle income countries, some very culturally closed countries, that I see lots of interpersonal trust rather than institutional. So people don't really trust the agency, but then I know this person has been helping me. Whatever this person says is something trustworthy. This happens. So I think that it is a beautiful thing to find. And then I think the need to think about when we try to build the trust, and then we can use wisely, and then also to rely on and this trust relationship when we do the communication. So trust can be built with the science and empathy in the food safety. I particularly want to highlight the middle one, this active listening, that this is something human is very good at, and then engaging with the concerns rather than telling like, oh, this is wrong, this is what you should do, but then rather, okay, what is your problem? What can you tell us? That what is the difficult thing? Can you, share with us that what you are doing? This kind of active listening, I realize that really contribute to build trust. And I was going to tell you about this. I just kind of anonymized this country name, but then it is Denmark. It's not a secret that we have had this egg recall. And then I just learned from the Denmark authority that this role of academia, kind of like extension specialist educators, really played a big role in setting up the risk communication approach. And then this government risk communication in the end went really well. No panic, everybody did what everybody had to do. So it was a beautiful transparency, effectiveness, the case study. So I just wanted to share with you. And I just have had these 4 different types of communication that I will go one by one. So constant and educational communication, I just almost like this is my conclusion, but then long game is the real game. So I would say that this is the most important communication that we need to do regularly, consistently. And then second one, proactive communication. So it's not about reacting, but then anticipating, so that we'll be able to prepare ourselves for the emergencies or something that goes wrong. So this is really part of the regular communication, but at the same time, this requires lots of preparation, planning from the communicator side. So this is another type of the communication. And then third one, of course, this is a risk communication, the reactive emergency communication when things go wrong. This is something that we do have to do, and then people tend to think this is the food safety, the core communication, but then this is just a highlight of the how to say our effort would pay off. So there's no time to build trust during the emergency, no time to prepare. So it becomes super important that how much we have been preparing, how much we have been thinking about, and then how much we are giving the efforts in doing the regular, peacetime communication, right? So this is something that I wanted to highlight, although this is quite visible, prominent, that this is not going to be successful if we don't do other types of communication. And then lastly, just I want to say that the balanced communication is somewhat hot topic that we have to do a careful identification and articulation, because sometimes there is such a thing that too much information or too little information. We have to find the right balance. And then this is something that we may learn over time, that knowing the audience and then knowing the topics. And then this is the fourth type of communication. Now that what to do about it, the cliche, but then still that in my opinion, tailoring is everything. So we always say like, know your audience, yes, we know. But then at the same time that I cannot emphasize more that the no one size fits all in communication, food safety communication required to think about, am I talking to my grandma? Am I talking to this food service person? Or are we talking about a student, talking to students? I mean, we have to kind of think about the situation, find some stories or analogies that can relate to them, thinking about how effectively the communication can reach their heart. And then this is something that I just really cannot ignore, that audience and then tailoring the message is somewhat fundamental. And at the global level, good practices exist, and then we do collect a lot from different countries, different contexts, different issues, and then, oh, this worked in this situation, this was really excellent, this was effective, this is efficient, lots of good practices exist, but then it's not going to be a universal practice. As I really confirm that it doesn't mean that the one thing work in this region would work in another region, but then still it's so useful to share these experiences because it will inspire this work in this region. Okay, why? And then we can think about the success parameters, and then, oh, maybe this is why that this worked, and then it inspires each other, and then it will become a very good treasure. So good practices we share, but then not to think about this will work everywhere. Now, this is my, I think, last slide, that in the AI era, where we can shift and grow. So my suggestion is that we can change from content creator to the context steward, right? And then let AI help us, but then we are the one who curate, and then we are the one who manage. And then we can go from solo educator to the system connectors. This is a wonderful example that Betty is putting together, Purdue University. I think that this connects us, and then adults connected, and we are stronger. And then we can stop just repeating the same messages over and over, but then rather to think about a behavior change design. And then we can think about communication as a part of this system. So integrate this nudging and behavior science so that it becomes more habits rather than just a scientific fact. And then lastly, we can change from the generalist to data literate decision maker or decision making assistant. So this is something AI still cannot do, but then we can completely use the AI to help us and then become different next level educators in food safety. So what kind of communicator will you be tomorrow? Thank you very much. Back to you, Betty, and then Super.